Hi, this is Ryan, and honestly, I was fully prepared to pack this thing back in its box after about 10 minutes. When you spend exactly $149 on a 24-inch monitor, you expect certain compromises. You expect the plastic chassis to creak if you squeeze the bezels too hard. You expect the tilt-only stand to wobble like a loose tooth every time you type. And most of all, you expect the screen itself to look like someone smeared thin layer of Vaseline over it. That heavy, grainy anti-glare coating budget brands love to use to hide the awful viewing angles of cheap panels. So I plugged it in, booted up a Lightroom catalog just to see exactly how washed out the factory calibration was, and okay, wait, let me back up for a second. If you're new here, I buy this stuff with my own money because I hate spec sheet marketing lies. Hit subscribe if you're into that. Because right now, I'm staring at a $150 panel that is objectively destroying the $400 Creator monitor sitting right next to it on my desk. But the weirdest part isn't that the colors are this vibrant. It's how the manufacturer pulled this off and what they quietly ripped out of the back of this chassis to pay for it. So let's talk about the reality of the sub-$200 monitor market. Historically, it's a wasteland. Usually when a company hits an $150 price tag, they're doing it by scraping the bottom of the parts bin. You get these ancient TN panels that look like a washed-out spreadsheet from 2008. Or you get cheap VA panels, where every time you scroll down a dark mode website, the white text smears across the black background into this sickening, blurry trail. I've reviewed dozens of them. They smell like warm ozone and regret. That's exactly the mindset I had pulling this thing out. Physically, it meets every low expectation. The chassis is made of that brittle, hollow-sounding matte plastic that instantly absorbs the oil from your fingerprints and never lets it go. Tapping the back panel produces a cheap, echoing thunk. And the stand, honestly, the stand is basically a threat to your posture. It's two pieces of stamped plastic that snap together, and if you bump your desk even slightly, the whole screen jiggles like Jell-O for a solid 4 seconds.
Actually, that's not entirely fair. The stand does have tilt, about 15 degrees of it, but it sits so low to the desk that unless you're literally 4 feet tall, you're going to be hunching your shoulders up to your ears. So within 10 minutes of unboxing it, I had already unscrewed the back plate, tossed the factory stand in a closet, and mounted it to a gas spring Visa arm. If you buy this, mentally add $40 to the price for an arm, you're going to need it. But then I actually turned it on. I didn't run synthetic colorimeter benchmarks right away. I just plugged in a DisplayPort cable, reached around the back to find the OSD joystick, which is this tiny, mushy plastic nub that feels like it's going to snap off if you push it too hard, and set the brightness to 80%. Then I opened a standard Chrome window, and I literally sat back in my chair. You know that feeling when you look at a really good modern smartphone screen where the icons almost look like they're painted directly onto the surface of the glass because there's no gap, no haze? That's what this felt like. I dragged a Lightroom catalog over from my Mac, specifically a shoot I did last year featuring these harsh, hyper-saturated red neon signs set against a pitch-black, rainy alleyway. On a normal, cheap IPS monitor, that red usually blows out into a radioactive, detailless blob. And the black brick wall, it usually glows with this muddy, grayish backlight bleed in the corners. Not here. The red gradient was smooth. The transition from the bright neon glass to the dark brick behind it was completely clean. I actually leaned in until my nose was about 3 inches from the panel, trying to spot the pixel grid or the telltale sparkly grain of a heavy anti-glare coating. The coating on this is shockingly light. The whites look like a clean sheet of printer paper, not a yellowed or blue-tinted office. I haven't run this through my long-term durability testing yet, so grain of salt. Maybe the backlight dies in 6 months. But right here, right now, the out-of-the-box color accuracy is baffling. It's effortlessly pushing 100% sRGB coverage without relying on that nasty, oversaturated fake pop that budget brands use to trick your eyes into thinking a screen is good. The math just doesn't add up. A panel with this kind of color volume, this level of factory calibration and viewing angles, usually means you're looking at an LG or a Dell UltraSharp running you at least $300 to $400. The bill of materials for this tier of glass alone should eat up a huge chunk of that $150 budget. So how did they do it?
Did panel manufacturing suddenly get incredibly cheap overnight? Or did they cut a massive hidden corner somewhere else to subsidize the cost of this gorgeous piece of glass? I spent the next 2 days digging into the spec sheets, tearing through the terrible OSD menus, and literally taking a flashlight to the I/O ports on the back. And what I found explains exactly why this monitor is so cheap and why you need to be very, very careful about how you set it up. I pulled out a flashlight. Not a metaphor, a literal aluminum LED flashlight, because the back of this monitor is so dark and recessed that I couldn't figure out why my DisplayPort cable felt crunchy when I tried to plug it in. I shined the light into the I/O cutout, and there it was, the first massive glaring compromise. The ports on the back, 2 HDMIs and 1 DisplayPort, are not reinforced at all. They are soldered directly to a bare green printed circuit board that you can actually see through a gap in the plastic housing. When you push a cable in, the entire board physically flexes inward, like a solid 2 or 3 millimeters of terrifying bend. If you're someone who uses a work laptop and constantly swaps cables at the end of the day, you're going to snap this board in half within a year. Guaranteed.
Then I looked down at the power cable. It doesn't use a standard heavy-duty 3-prong PC cable that plugs into an internal power supply. It uses an external power brick. And not a good one. It's this Featherlight unbranded black plastic rectangle. After about 3 hours of having the screen on, I laid my hand flat against it, and it was uncomfortably warm. It had that faint, weirdly sweet smell of hot, cheap electronics. There's no UL safety listing stamped on it either, just some generic alphabet soup brand name. That's how they paid for the gorgeous panel. They outsourced the internal controller board and the power delivery to the absolute lowest bidder. Okay, let me back up for a second. I realize I sound incredibly harsh right now. And maybe you're thinking, Ryan, if I just plug it in once, zip tie the cables, and never touch the ports again, does it really matter? Honestly, I was thinking the exact same thing. You set it, you forget it, you enjoy the amazing colors. But then I decided to actually play a game. Look at the box this thing comes in. It has 1 millisecond response time and 165 hertz, printed in giant, aggressive silver lettering. It's marketed specifically as an esports gaming monitor. So I booted up Cyberpunk 2077, I loaded into a dark, rainy alleyway in Night City, grabbed my mouse, and whipped the camera quickly to the left. Instantly, I felt slightly nauseous. The beautiful, crisp neon signs I was just raving about, the second they started moving, they dragged these massive, smeared tails of color behind them. It looked like someone spilled a glass of water on a wet watercolor painting. The motion clarity was atrocious. I dove back into that terrible little joystick menu on the back of the monitor. I found a setting called Overdrive. It was set to off out of the box. I bumped it up to medium. The smearing got a little better. So, logically, I cranked it all the way to extreme because that's what you have to do to hit that advertised 1 millisecond response time, right? I went back to the game. I panned the camera again. Now, instead of a blurry smear trailing behind the lights, there was a bright glowing inverse halo outlining every single moving object on the screen. It looked like the game was heavily radioactive. This is called inverse ghosting, or overshoot. It happens when a cheap monitor forces its pixels to change state faster than they physically can by blasting them with way too much voltage. I was sure this was just a defect with my specific unit, and I was half wrong. It's not a defect, it's physics. You cannot get a flawless lightning-fast IPS panel with zero ghosting for $150. That 1 millisecond claim on the box, it's a complete fabrication. It's based on a strobing backlight mode that completely locks you out of adjusting your brightness, disables variable refresh rate, and gives you a headache if you look at it for more than 20 minutes. The actual real-world pixel response time on this panel is probably closer to 6 or 8 milliseconds. So here is the bizarre, highly conflicted reality we're looking at. If you leave a static image on this screen, it punches so far above its weight class, it's almost comical. It beats monitors that cost triple the price in raw color accuracy and text clarity. But the second you demand speed from it, the second you try to use it for the exact hardcore gaming it's explicitly marketed for, the illusion completely shatters.
Which begs a really uncomfortable question. Who is this actually for? So who is this actually for? Let's be brutally honest, it is definitely not for the 15-year-old trying to climb the competitive ranks in Valorant. If you rely on split-second reaction times and crisp motion to track targets across your screen, this monitor will actively make you worse at the game. I keep saying gaming monitor because that's what the aggressive silver font on the cardboard box screams at you, but what I really mean is it's a budget creator display wearing a cheap Halloween costume.
I'm convinced the manufacturer knows exactly what they built. They just also know that if you list a display on Amazon as an accurate 100% sRGB productivity panel, you might sell a few dozen units to nerds like me. But if you slap 165 Hz 1 millisecond esports on the title, you sell tens of thousands of units to parents buying Christmas gifts. It's a Trojan horse. Because yesterday, I completely stopped trying to game on it. I opened up a dense, multi-track Premiere Pro project instead. I sat there for 3 hours cutting a video, and honestly, it was an absolute joy to look at. The UI scaling was sharp. The tiny color-coded clips on the timeline didn't have that fuzzy, low-contrast edge you usually get on cheap screens. I had a massive Google Doc open on the right half of the screen, and the text was tack sharp because this panel uses a standard RGB subpixel layout. A lot of budget screens quietly use BGR layouts, which basically breaks Windows ClearType and makes text look like it has a faint red and blue shadow. Not here. The text looked like it was printed on paper. You're probably thinking, okay, but I actually want to play games. What do I buy? Yeah, I get it. If you want a smooth, fast experience for $150, go buy the AOC 24G2 SP or the Gigabyte G24 F2. I've tested them both extensively. The AOC actually has a fantastic, fully adjustable ergonomic stand right in the box, and the overdrive tuning is vastly superior. Your games won't smear. But the colors on the AOC are just fine. They're perfectly acceptable. They don't have that startling glossy depth this thing has. Which brings us to the actual verdict. I haven't used this monitor for a year yet. I honestly can't tell you if that sketchy external power brick is going to survive a hot summer, or if a single dead pixel is going to pop up right in the center of the screen next month. Budget quality control is always a lottery, so factor that risk into your math. But if it were my $150, here's exactly what I would do. I'd buy this monitor specifically to use as a secondary display for a dual monitor WFH setup, or as a primary monitor if my main hustle was graphic design, coding, or photo editing on a strict budget. But, and this is a massive but, I would immediately throw the plastic stand in the garbage. I would spend an extra $35 on a basic Amazon Basics Visa arm. When setting it up, I would plug the DisplayPort cable in exactly once, extremely gently. Then I would take a zip tie and anchor that cable directly to the metal monitor arm so there's zero downward pulling force on that fragile, exposed internal circuit board. And I'd make sure that unbranded power brick is sitting out in the open on a hard desk surface, not buried under a carpet where it can trap heat. You are paying $150 for a $300 piece of glass, housed inside a $10 plastic shell. If you treat it like a premium gaming peripheral, you will break it and you will be deeply disappointed. But if you handle it like a fragile, beautiful scientific instrument, it is undeniably the best looking budget panel I've ever put on this desk. Anyway, I'm gonna go ice my neck from hunching over that factory stand for the first 20 minutes of testing. If this saved you from a bad purchase or helped you figure out your desk setup, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.